Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic has gotten some interesting news in the past few weeks, ranging from some returning Old Guard veterans joining Casey Hudson on this project with some promising names and positions being filled out, along with further confirmations and details about the game from Casey directly, where we can see a little bit of which way this game seems to be going in terms of development, scope, and direction. But before we get into that fully, make sure to show off your hype for Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic by scrolling down and hitting those hype, like, and subscribe buttons to help us reach our like goal of 25 likes on this video, and so you don't miss out on any Star Wars Old Republic news as it comes out. Also, consider becoming a member of the channel to be listed and have your approved and chosen images shown at the end of videos, just like this one. Now, without further ado, let's get into the creatives revealed as a part of their development team, along with then diving into the details said by Casey Hudson in an interview that allows to see how this game is shaping up to be behind the scenes. First off, on May 4th this year, on the official Arcanaut Studios page, the development team that's actually in charge of making Fate of the Old Republic, they revealed a handful of creatives that are now confirmed to be working on the game, with a lot of them having great resumes, prior projects, or even straight up being a part of the old Bioware team from back in their golden age, where it felt like they could do almost no wrong. As a side note, please excuse me if I mispronounce some of these names. We start off with there being Dan Fessenden, a senior technical designer who actually helped in the original KOTOR and Mass Effect 1. We then have Melanie Faulkner, a director of external development who had a hand in Mass Effect 3, Dragon Age 2, and Dragon Age Inquisition. After that, we have Pascal Blantz, an art director whose most notable project seems to be Far Cry: A New Dawn. We then have Caroline Livingstone, a director of production and performance who worked on Neverwinter Nights, the original KOTOR, Mass Effect, and Dragon Age. And finally, we end off with Ryan Hoyle being presented as a chief technology officer who worked on the original KOTOR and Mass Effect trilogy as a whole, where we see 4 out of the 5 new revealed core members have ties to the fantastic run Bioware had back in the day, with some even being from the original KOTOR project all those years ago. Sadly, out of all of these confirmed names and developers that just got recently confirmed, none of them are from the writing team, which, if you ask me, is one of the major reasons why everyone loved the original KOTOR duology so much. Because they had an amazing story with some cool developments and fights, and of course, the awesome characters and developments that they themselves go through throughout the campaigns. And currently we know that someone like Drew Karpyshyn, who was credited as the main writer for the original KOTOR, should not be tied to this game at all, as he is currently working on another giant space RPG game with tons of branching story and dialogue options, in the same vein as something like Mass Effect, as a lead writer over there at Archetype Entertainment, which is currently slated for an early 2027 release. Which, by the way, if that game sounds interesting to you, I have a whole dedicated podcast and series of videos talking about everything that we know about the game, including trailer breakdowns, announcements, lore, and more, which will be linked down below in the description of this video if you're interested. But getting back on topic, if they were to want the other writers also credited majorly from then to be on the project as well, we would have to see someone like David Gator or Mac Walters, as they were both writers associated with the original KOTOR script and the Mass Effect trilogy script respectively, along with Drew Karpyshyn, who was the lead on both. That, or get someone else or another full writing team entirely who they trust wholeheartedly to pen up a resonating script and characters for the game. Once they reveal the writers, that will be one of the most indicating factors, in my opinion, on whether this game will be shaping up to be a true great successor for the Old Republic games. Speaking of being a great successor to the games, Casey Hudson has been quoted in an interview recently steering us into the direction Fate of the Old Republic is going in, to seemingly try and capture that lightning in a bottle that they had all those years ago on the original KOTOR games. Casey Hudson has stated bigger isn't always better, and then reinforces it by saying, although some single player games take hundreds of hours to beat from start to finish, that will not be the case for this particular project, where bigger isn't necessarily better, as most players just want to play something and finish it within a reasonable time frame. Where he says, like the original Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect, Fate of the Old Republic will have some replay value due to storylines that can only be discovered by taking different paths. And I don't know about you guys, but that sounds pretty damn exciting to me, as you can have some pretty drastic variations in not only the ending, but some outcomes of the overall side characters in your crew, depending on which actions you end up taking. Where we get to see into his insight briefly of what direction FOTOR is assumingly going for, where we can expect a shorter experience in terms of a single player game and overall playtime, but one where replayability is there and maybe even encouraged to find new routes in the story and probably have different outcomes for the characters in the game as well. This could be as simple as seeing things in different lights in terms of the main story from a light side, dark side, or maybe even neutral perspective, have different outcomes, looks, and maybe even thoughts from major side characters, and of course have an entirely different ending to the game based on the different choices that you make. Where I don't think there will be tons of different variations, but at the very least 2 to 3 different and very distinct endings, because the more endings and variations you have in them, the more time something like overall game development would actually take. And of course, I land on 2 to 3 for the main perspectives often seen in Star Wars lore. The Sith side, the Jedi side, and the third-party Force users who lay somewhere in the middle. And so far, Casey Hudson is still reaffirming his very early remark from the original announcement of the game, that the game should be coming out a little before or around 2030 at the moment. Which, all things considered, isn't too far away when considering the usual timeline of game development as a whole. So them having a ton of variations in the story doesn't seem like it would be the case unless there were a lot of minor things that would change in them, not big story proponents or full-on side stories that change depending on actions done in the game. And if there is a lot of those types of actions, I would then expect there to be only around 2 overall different paths. He also, in this very same interview, mentioned they wouldn't be using AI to help with development of the game, since as he says, it makes things feel a little bit soulless, which other developers usually attribute to speeding some things and aspects of development along. So with them still being confident in that original timeline, like I mentioned in my prior video, it feels like they probably have a good development process or some internal things already in later stages than maybe we from the outside looking in ultimately don't know about. Which, as I've stated in prior videos, Casey Hudson until late 2024 was originally helming a completely different studio working on an entirely different space theme game that was ultimately shut down due to lack of funding apparently. So it's my theory that maybe they've been working on a FOTOR announcement behind the scenes a bit in terms of Disney overall, and handed this off to Casey and tasked him with building a brand new team, with prior work being done in the interim so they could get this out as soon as possible. Or, if not that, my other crackpot theory is that maybe they're using the KOTOR 1 and allegedly 2 remakes gameplay to help shape or be very similar to how this one will actually end up playing at, as ultimately, these will all end up being Star Wars Old Republic centered games, and maybe they want them to feel similar because of that when it comes to a gameplay sense. Which either way, no matter what it ultimately ends up being, hopefully we get some good updates sooner rather than later, as I've been starving for Old Republic era Star Wars content, as so far all they keep doing with the KOTOR remake is teasing us with reaffirmations that the game is being worked on with no actual tangible updates for the fans almost at all. Hopefully we continue to get better and better news in terms of FOTOR and the KOTOR remakes down the line as we get closer and closer to their hopefully eventual releases. Anyways, guys, that's all I have for you all today. Let me know what you are hoping they add into Fate of the Old Republic. If you think the news we got of replayability being at the forefront is good, and if you are excited to hear more about this game in the comment section down below. For everyone who's made it this far, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. As always, your support through your viewership, liking, and subscribing is always greatly appreciated and helps me out tremendously against the universal threat that is the YouTube algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Peace!